No, we didn't discuss this because we canceled last week. We've kind of, since I moved over to EAM, there's all these more people to help. And they advised me that it's okay just to record the meetings and post them on YouTube.
Perfect.
So I'm not doing
We do.
Commissioner.
the laborious effort of summarizing things.
So much easier. And if somebody wants,
It is.
somebody wants the meeting, here's the link. Watch the meeting.
So,
I'm not gonna digest it for you.
Right. Right.
new era.
Yeah, and you'll have to rely upon me for capturing every single thought.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. That's my brain.
We could just, 1, 2, 3. We could just begin, and if Mike shows up, I think that's. Yeah.
Hey, Jim.
Hi, how are you all?
Good.
Good. Sorry I'm not there. Thought I was going to be there, but didn't work out.
You have such a comfy looking office though.
I know. Those
I know.
Thank you.
That's what I got. Those chairs.
Now that's,
Stared his art the whole time, like.
You're jealous of people that have offices, looks like you can take a nap in them.
It's
Yeah,
a
at the
good
City
life.
Hall, it looks just like opposite City Hall. Oh, wait.
Yeah,
no,
I
not
think
at
it
all.
is. It's very
Yeah, not at
similar.
all.
The leather.
Yeah. Is it
We wanna-
industry?
Call the meeting to order.
Chair.
Yeah, I will call this meeting of the Capital Planning Commission to order for January 11th, 2024. Do we need to just want to go around and do our, like a self roll?
Do a roll call.
Okay,
Mike Abate. Not here at the moment.
Saw.
Jim Bauer,
Here,
Jane Griggs.
Here.
Chris Hoy,
here.
Jan Cuff. Sorry, I'll get there.
First time I've heard of those names. I've heard Jan before, but never Jane.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jan.
Yeah.
Jeremy Miller.
Here.
And the rest, we have a quorum. Just remind everybody, just for the record, we have 2 open legislative positions that we're maybe in one of these years will get filled. And we do have a new appointee to the Salem Planning, for the Salem Planning Commission, as we were discussing earlier. Haven't fully connected with that person, but I'm gonna onboard them as soon as possible and decide how they want to contribute to the commission. So looks like we have a quorum.
Excellent. Do we have a motion for approval of the minutes from our last meeting?
Second.
moved.
Second.
Motion by member Bauer, second by member Griggs. Any discussion?
Can I point out 2 typos in there?
Sure.
Yes.
They spelled you change.
I'm so used to it.
They're correct, probably.
It's okay.
Yes.
It's.
And I don't want to be
Correct.
picky, but I just thought I'd point out, and Daniel is misspelled in the second.
I spelled my own.
Your own name, that's awesome.
Classic Daniel.
Names that they misspelled.
Yeah.
Any other corrections?
No.
All right, so
Those are noted and they'll be in the posted version online.
do we need to do a vote or just consensus that the minutes are adopted?
Well, in principle, the content is the same. You're just doing a misspelling. So I think it's fair to just accept it as is. And
He's wondering if you have to call for I vote.
Do I need to get people to vote aye or we just
Consent.
by consensus?
I think just consent.
For friendly group.
So we'll adopt the minutes as amended. And I will turn it over to staff for administrative rule update progress.
Okay, that's me. I'm gonna share my screen there. Oops. Oh, waiting to be let into the meeting.
do not.
It's over there. You might- outside.
Just email him the link again. He may be on the wrong link.
Okay.
It might be for the previous meeting
Maybe.
location.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
There was a second separate link.
So, do my sharing thing. Do you want to pause for like 30 seconds?
You bet.
We're not having to repeat.
Used to having my mouse and
So
stuff.
Lisa, I heard that Michael is going to be the president of the planning commission.
Shoes to fill though.
Yeah.
Oh,
are we gonna be opening up the Secretary of State Administrative Rules PDF? Is that the plan? Daniel?
You can, it's basically for reference.
Oh, okay. All right,
Fruit
no
of
worries.
our labors kind of a thing.
Okay. Yeah, it is that.
All right. Well, I'll just continue a little bit here. So just as a kind of a status update of where we're at. So we went through that sort of several month process of addressing the issues with the administrative rules and empowering CPC in much more clear and concise fashion, how to undertake their role and sort of procedures for having agencies interact with the commission. And I just want to let you know that where we left it was we agreed that we had consensus at our meeting that to move forward with rulemaking. We went through the rulemaking process and they were adopted. So all that work was officially done, and just the things in my way. A little bar pops up and I can't use my mouth. So this is from the Secretary of State's website to indicate, just as a visual, I guess, trophy.
Just for the
Yeah.
record, member Abate has joined us.
Hey, Mike.
Hey there, sorry, I've been trying to get in and so anyway, glad I'm here.
Welcome.
So Mike, we just started just saying, just as an update of where we're at in our roadmap of things to do. We completed our administrative rule revision that has been through the rulemaking process, been adopted and published by the Secretary of State's office. So that is effectively was live since October 1st. So that doesn't mean much because we haven't met or anything, but everything that we discussed in there was included, and they were consolidated into one division within that chapter. So thanks everybody for helping with that.
You did the
You did the work.
work.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Smiled and nodded.
Thanks. So I just want to kind of give you an update about where we are at and moving forward. So that gives us a lot of sort of guidance and direction in terms of how to approach all future, interactions with the commission, with agencies, and how we address planning and project reviews within the capital area. Are you presenting? It's not going to my thing now. Sorry. When it comes to Teams, I'm just like, I am not good at presenting this thing. So I showed you this slide deck probably 10 or 15 times. It's like there are kind of flow of things that we were trying to get accomplished and go through, and we got to we established our working committee. I'm just going to kind of paraphrase this. We did the rules and we went through the formal rulemaking process. That was adopted. So what's next up for us is to update the charter. So we also updated the CPAB charter to reflect our rule changes, but it more dramatically affects CPC's charter because it was really not consistent at all between the duties and what was listed there. And I included what is the current charter that was, I'm not even sure when this was produced, maybe 2009.
Yeah, there's a statute reference in it was discontinued in 2009.
Yeah, so this is all horribly outdated and doesn't reflect what the text in the rule. But the next step is for just the function of the commission is to update that and ensure that's consistent, where the commission has a clear set of like, here are my actions for the meetings. Here's the what constitutes the membership of the commission, how we vote and what we vote on and what that means. So those are all issues that have unfortunately come up during meetings as we're deciding the actions that result from the presentations. It's like, well, what are we doing? So this is a way to kind of clarify that for commissioners to know exactly what they're being asked to do in their review of projects and plans. So this is kind of your tool, but it's what we agree upon in terms of what your actions are for each meeting. And again, how I think the most productive way of resolving this and moving this forward is for me to prepare all these changes and make sure everything's consistent with rule language and whatnot. And then I bring that back to our working group. And if the same folks are interested in participating in a working group, consistency for all, and we can even do it at City Hall if you want, but I think it's maybe 1 to 2 meetings at most to just solidify this.
Just as a reminder, that was Shane, myself and Jim.
Right.
I think it was just
Yeah.
3 of us. wasn't it? Yeah.
I'm
Um,
happy to help again.
I mean,
Thank you.
if people want to swap, that's fine. It's just remember the intent was to keep a working group that is below the quorum threshold, so we're not constituting a public meeting. We can openly discuss, just the minutia of it without.
So we'll have a work group to work through this.
Yeah, but I like before, I will come with content.
Okay.
And we'll just solidify it on the margin, because I think some of this is pretty straightforward, but there are some things that we can deliberate and negotiate in terms of moving forward, which, like what the mayor had brought up, is the second Thursday at 3 p.m. ideal. There's nothing in statute or rule that says that has to be the time and date. This is an agreed upon thing for the commission to decide how it wants to do it. So I don't think any time or day is going to be ideal, but I will say that scheduling the CPC meeting is usually the most problematic. And it gets kind of bad like around July, because there's always like the holiday, the 4th of July, and everybody's gone. And so we should be a little bit mindful about that. But at the same time, there are these issues these times where there's a CPC meeting on Thursday and it just happens to be a CPAP meeting on Friday. This is kind of a lot of meetings for 1 week for like our staff. So if there is interest in kind of breaking that up in some way, that could be a possibility, but I leave that to the group.
For my schedule, it's just that second Thursday, 3 to 5 is when I have another standing meeting every month. If you change it to 1 to 3 on the same Thursdays,
3.
it would be fine. 1
I got my grandchildren.
to 3 would be perfect.
Okay. So keep
That's
it
a
the same.
conflict for me, sorry.
Okay.
I have a standing meeting, we have our leadership team meeting then, at 1. But,
No worries.
it's not every week either, so,
What week is it?
well, it's set every week, but we don't always have to have it. So, I'll just, if that's the only time that works for you guys, then I'll try and make them when I can. The later time is after that set meeting, the 3
Okay.
o'clock time, but
So if we
I
just
get it.
shifted Thursdays, kept the same time, but shifted Thursdays, that would be fine for me.
Thursdays are good for that 3 to 5 time works good for me, but figure out what works and I'll do what I can.
Okay. I think probably be easiest for me to propose some options,
Great.
and this will see what has the least amount of conflict for people for these ongoing commitments.
Yeah.
I mean, meetings are going to come up, but
Absolutely.
it's the ones where we don't want to schedule it at the same time as another mandatory, I'm the chair of this board and I can't, so.
I'm the chair of this one and the vice chair of the conflict meeting, and where I'm often chairing it, so that's the issue for me.
Right.
Also, I would not worry about it.
So I'll make a note to examine, or at least throw out some options and see what makes sense for most people. So that just gives you a little bit of a preview of what it is that we have to essentially remodel next. Is the
Daniel, I got a question. And we may have discussed this already, but if there was a project that was 50 feet outside of the Salem city limits, would it be inside our jurisdiction or is this prescriptive or coded by city limits? I mean, it's in the jargon, it's in the language, but I just wondered how we would handle that.
Well, I think it's a matter of an interpretation, and we can make that a topic amongst the commission, whether or not at the time of intake, is this something that we feel qualifies for review on that basis. But in general, all agencies are likely going to be proposing things on state-owned land in the Salem area, which is presumably at least part of the urban growth boundary, and it's implied that that means the capital area is synonymous with the city of Salem in some way, even though there's a technical.
Because we
Yes.
don't manage anything on state-owned lands that are outside of, say, like in Eastern Oregon, we don't go review anything.
No,
over
it's
there.
just in the capital area around these.
So I think wouldn't happen, I don't think.
Well, I'm just trying to think of a situation where there would be land that's outside
Well,
the urban
it-
growth boundary, but public land between outside the city of Salem, I think it implies that it's the same, but it's whether or not it's.
Well, this could be for other work. When I was preparing and reading this stuff before the meeting, for whatever reason, that jumped out at me that the language is constantly Salem Kaiser city limits.
Yeah.
As opposed to, I guess I thought of it as more, because I think you can be in the urban growth boundary and out of the city limit in Salem, pretty possible. Maybe
Yes.
I've got that wrong, but I think that's true.
There are 30,000 residents in East Salem who don't live in the city, but are in the
Yeah.
urban growth boundary.
Yes, that's what I thought.
Yeah, it's really.
Just a little nuance. I think it's a situational thing that we would address at the time of review that, because we're kind of speculating that that is something that may come up, but I don't know how likely that would be.
I
So
think it would have to be a property purchase at this point, and I'm not aware of any in the.
we created mechanisms to property purchase to be added to an existing area plan contiguously or as its own. So I feel like that would resolve itself on some level, but we would probably have to discuss it as it would come about. Does that sound fair?
Yeah,
Okay.
no, I'm not trying to land on it. I mean, as we redo the charter, it's in the charter, the language is quite specific. That's all I was asking.
Okay, so I think maybe within the charter, when we have definitions within the rules, but I think that there could be some room for some technical clarifications for executing your duties. Like, what does this mean exactly? So you're not having this conversation during a CPC meeting while the agency is presenting to you and whether or not it makes sense to review this or if it qualifies. We should probably have some thresholds for, and that I think was the intent of having the staff review process internally before it goes to CPC is I would make those kind of determinations about how this sort of fits within area plans in our process here and provide a staff report that would summarize what is at issue.
Yeah, my guess is that the agency is going to be analyzing whatever language that we have, and they're going to try, if they don't have to bring it to us, if they see a path to not have to bring it before us, they're going to do that. So
Yeah, but
we would want that set out ahead of time so that it's clear and then one way or the other.
$1 is pretty clear though.
Yeah.
That if that reaches that threshold, it would have to come from us.
there really
Unless
isn't like
it's
a
outside the
perfectly
city.
sustainable path for them to ignore complying with this through some sort of loophole. I think that I would reel that in.
Okay.
Jeremy, do we have any lands outside of the city?
I was over here thinking about it myself, and DAS doesn't necessarily, but
That doesn't mean it's just-
some agencies do.
Yeah, I mean, I've looked at the map pretty extensively and in search of available land that we could use, and I haven't seen any that I recall that is outside the city but inside the urban growth boundary. There is land in the river literally in the river that's owned by the state.
So useful.
But I don't imagine they're gonna be building on it. But otherwise, I'm not aware of any.
Well, it may be that there's a particular building, a particular parcel outside of the city limits, but I think part of that review process internally is to sort of contemplate the implications of that particular building or property relative to the capital. So if it's, 10 miles away, does that have any real implication or bearing in terms of what the CPC is sort of set up to do and their purpose in sort of coordinating things within the city, growth and development wise, versus it just being some sort of outlier that is only on the fringe, has some sort of relationship to the city, but it's actually kind of, not really part of the city, the capital area per se.
The only pushback I would give on that, this is just kind of a random thought, is let's say the OSP building, the state police building, was actually a state-owned building, and yet it's kind of forged new ground out in where it was. I think that we would want to have a voice in that. Now,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Because it's kind of an anomaly.
Yeah.
And so if there was something like that were to happen that's state-owned outside the city, but in the UGB, I would think we would want to be able to, because that does impact things. It impacts transportation. It impacts our streets, our roads, whether it's right in the city or not, it still has a lot of implications for the city and the capital area.
Couldn't it just be an easy language change just within Salem Kaiser or within the Salem urban growth boundary?
That's what I was thinking.
Well, this
Yeah.
this is something that the language that we can add to our planning manual as a condition or as a definition. It's one of those things where you have something that kind of skirts the literal interpretations of the rule or the statute, because you have a leased facility that was built to suit for an agency that
Like the
didn't,
Treasury Building?
well, at the Treasury building. Now, there are processes in place that deal with certain things. And so if you have an owned facility on state land, the process, we've clarified that rule. A new leased facility was actually kind of a CPAB function. But it does have, if it's in the city of Salem, it has some implication to that. So yeah, I guess those are things we gotta kind of.
When you think about the whole purpose of this, it's to kind of facilitate the relationship, the kind of the planning relationship between the city and the state, and those kinds of, like, having a major building on Kubler, a state building, is a big deal because Kubler is,
Yes.
a lot of issues that we have to deal with. And, I just think the more things that, not that I'm looking for work, but the more things that this group looks at that are within our UGB, I think the better.
Okay.
That's my
I
take.
agree. I also think Kaiser's a whole nother animal here that we haven't even talked about, but there's probably a few potholes over there to look at.
Yeah, there's certainly, I don't know if those are state-owned buildings or if they're leased. I'm not sure in the city of Kaiser, but, and then also as we look to, or not we, as they look to split off from our UGB, that could change that as well. So we want to be
Yes.
cognizant of that.
Yep.
I mean, the intent of what you're asked to do is to evaluate plans, projects relative to these area plans, which are a policy framework, right? And that's the mechanism through which you can kind of enforce the policies or compliance with what we've outlined. But when we're dealing with a leased facility that is not a part of an area plan, we don't have a real way to apply this group's policies in affecting that, I guess from a legal standpoint for the power of this group. But the city does, the planning department and planning commission, all that, you still have those tools to ensure that, your transportation goals are met and that there's an overloading of, intersections and all those kind of things. And I think that might be a way to, the city has a role in determining what the shape and size and complexity of those uses are, where there's a bit of a loophole in the CPC role. I mean, by and large, your role is to evaluate projects relative to the plans and the policies and the plans, and you would have this role of helping to shape those policy and plans. But if it's those specific instances are not a part of anything, what do you have to evaluate it against? It becomes subjective in some level. But the city would still have a role in determining leased facility and on the places that aren't on state-owned land. So I think we'll have to continue to massage these things on the margin. So I just wanted to let everybody know that that work was completed. Thank you all. We're moving forward. We need to update the charter, and that gets us largely through a great deal of our work plan, because then there's a matter of just developing the intake materials, review materials, and then the bulk of the next work beyond that is, what do we do with these area plans?
Yeah.
So we have all these area plans across the city that we've been talking about how to sort of shape and improve and update. And what does that look like? And Jeremy and I have been discussing that, say in kind of an infancy, how we would move forward with that. At the same time, we have a few irons in the fire, so we're multitasking in our brain. But this is one of those tasks that it's there's different phases and there's different levels of involvement, and it would take a long time, I think, to set up and establish sort of a process that all of these could be done in a periodic kind of basis. So even though it does seem like there's a lot of work to be done forthcoming.
And we don't have any design standards on any of those area plans yet, do we?
No, we do have design standards. Well, they're called
Expectations?
they're called implementation policies, I believe. But they deal with like these sort of core sort of areas of landscaping. And there's like transportation. There's things in the I think it's in the statute, but there's these components that it's supposed to address. I think I interpret that as at a minimum. You know, you have a minimum of addressing transportation needs, that you have
Yeah, you gotta have
landscaping needs.
Otherwise,
That's
when
what-
they come to us with a request or proposed project, we have nothing to which to compare it, or to say you're not following these. We just don't like it, but we don't like it because you're not doing X, Y, and Z.
Well,
So it's really tough to make those
yeah,
decisions.
so there are these policies within the plans. They're somewhat vague, and you.
Because when we were looking at the Supreme Court building,
Mhm.
it was sort of kind of anything would go. I mean, there was nothing, it was a hard decision to say, I don't like this particular element of your plan, because we had nothing against to compare. So that'll be good. I mean, we really do need those design standards, and I think that's going to be our biggest, or your biggest bulk of work to develop it.
I think the advantage of this group is that everyone here kind of knows specifically what would be the language that we should have, the level of specificity that would be helpful for making those decisions, and we can work towards that. And there's enough internal knowledge of the city and what is sort of expected that we can be specific. I think what's in a lot of those plans now, it's very kind of generalized plan language that, it could be kind of anything kind of wiggles in here.
I brought up, Jan, you'd be interested in this. I brought this up when DAS West is going through its remodel now, and they have in the design very dark windows, no transparency at all. For City of Salem, if you're downtown, we want to be able to look into we want people to pedestrian unless it's like a doctor's clinic or something. So it's just really opposite. So I could see how in that case, if the state building is close to the pedestrian walkway, we would want some design standards on those windows. We would want to be able to see and to be consistent with what we are doing downtown and other parts of our downtown,
Okay.
as an example.
Oh, go ahead, Mike.
You're on mute, Mike.
Oh my God, I never thought I'd have to hear that again. You're on mute, because we're so far
Sorry
from
about
Zoom.
that.
Very good.
So just to follow up on Jane's comment, it's one of my questions is about overlapping jurisdiction. So area plans, for example, do they also have to go through the city of Salem conditional use or institutional master planning process? And so do these things end up also going to the Planning Commission or to Salem City Council? They're not exempt, right? They're not exempt from
It's state
Salem land use.
Correct. They're not exempt.
So did it go
Okay.
through, did the DAS West go through you guys?
Yes.
Because they didn't have.
But as a project, it goes through, it's not going through like a
A design.
sub-area plan.
Right.
Review
Their
and approval.
permitting
And
process.
Okay, the pro.
So there's zoning standards that apply, maybe design standards depending on where it's at in the city.
But has the city, the planning commission and the council had a role in helping to adopt an area plan for DAS? I'm not sure what the
Not
legal
8 years.
mechanism would be other than that's an adopted
a
master
special-
plan.
We have special zoning for the Capitol Mall,
Yeah.
but otherwise, no.
But that would be the base zoning for all activity in that area, regardless of what agencies planned. You got to deal with the public zone, whatever that is, public use zone. So
The gist,
I don't know
the
what-
gist of my question is, and this doesn't have to be answered today, but maybe as a step to research is, I understand through my process, our process on the Vietnam Memorial, that we went to 4 or 5 different boards, 2 of them within the city of Salem for approval. And a lot of times the same questions were being asked. And so I think there's incredible benefit to having the Capital Planning Commission looking at specific projects. What I think would be helpful, though, is that there isn't a sort of a double jeopardy, that we're coordinated with the other land use entities that are going to be reviewing this. And if they have more specificity on design standards, for example, then maybe that we defer that and we don't draft our own that are necessary, that could possibly be contradictory. So that's all I'm just trying to say. It's how do we fit within the milieu of approval agencies in general for DAS and state of Oregon buildings and
Is that a
projects.
stack project? Did that have to go to the Art Commission?
I was thinking it went through Historic Landmarks Commission because Capitol Mall is designated historic district.
Okay.
And then it went through
Plan.
just through planning because it was tree removal and stuff like that.
So this is interesting because it's actually kind of teeing up what I was hoping to kind of talk about today a little bit is how we move forward. And I think part of it is understanding so if you use the agencies or are these area plans, if you think about it, they need like a safe harbor. So if the safe harbor is that all of the city's development requirements, zoning ordinances are sort of the base for these plans, that gives an agency safe harbor to determine what happens within those areas that doesn't require a legal review process through the planning commission. Does that seem reasonable? Or if it abides by,
Like if somebody comes to the city of Salem wanting to develop something and they go to planning, if they can make that administrative review, if they've met all this baseline, if you've met all this and you're not asking for any exceptions,
yeah, you're not asking for a zone change, you're
Go
not.
to the Planning Commission,
Variance or-
staff decision. That's
So if we could, I like that idea, that proposal.
So we've developed these area plans, updated, they're compliant with all of the city's existing requirements for that
Yeah.
area.
And then you don't have to write them.
Then the agency has sort of safe harbor to develop within those parameters. So that,
You would still want an administrative review because you would want to review it at your level, just like Lisa does at the city level to ensure that they do meet those.
yes, we still
safe
have a
standards.
review process, but it's what that review satisfies. If it satisfies the requirements for DAS, which are just comply with our own statutes and rules about as a state government, then there's the sort of the legal framework of,
Yeah.
Is it land use approvals? So if what is that the plans are consistent with the existing land use requirements for that particular area, and then the review is sort of based on that. Does that sound sort of somewhat tenable as a position that we can move forward like that? Is like, here's the baseline of
For all the area plans.
for all the area plans relative to the zoning, if there's any special zones or things like that. It's all like laid out for sort of existing conditions in the.
Were they impacted at all from our Salem? Did we change any zoning or anything?
Only on Center Street, we changed like the dome around the dome building.
Sure.
Use the
But
tax
they're-
requests.
Yeah.
I think that's the only one. We went through every property that was state owned and had a meeting
Okay.
with Darren when he was
Yeah.
over each one. That's the only one we changed.
That's what I couldn't remember any, but that would make sense for sure.
That's something, yeah, we changed it.
Okay.
So this is just, I want to show just kind of the plans that were left to deal with. A couple of them have fallen away just because they've been decommissioned, but
Can you enlarge that a little bit?
I mean,
Yeah.
Oregon State Fairgrounds, interesting.
Yeah, I knew that was.
that toolbar's moved. Okay. You see that?
Yeah, better.
Okay, so yeah, fairgrounds, I actually found the fairgrounds plan, but it's didn't seem like it was complete or something.
I met with the new football team that's that's gonna be playing out there just
Really?
this week. I met with the owners, yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, I haven't really dug into a lot of these, so if I seem like I'm talking over my skis, it's because I don't really know what the specifics of some of these things are. I just,
Why is it below the line?
because
You couldn't figure out how to do a return
because of,
on that last
I think
above the line.
because there's been change in who stewards the property. I think DAS has it now. Jeremy, is that right? Is that the fairgrounds are stewarding that?
Managing their bonds for them.
Okay.
DAS owns the property.
Yeah.
We are not telling them what to do.
So it's kind of this,
Another kind of quasi-independent.
it's an outlier that I think we need to like dig into to figure out how we're going to do that, or if we need to do that, or if it's still valid. I just put it down there because I just didn't want to spend too much time. For the purpose of this slide, which is to show the sort of the inventory of things that that need to be updating and how old they are. I think
So I can just tell you from the city's perspective, the state fairgrounds property is absolutely something we are invested in having a part of this process because it's
And
the most
there's a
significant.
lot of transportation issues around that.
Huge, yeah, and it's the most, there's a lot of open area there within our city that is a lot of people would love to get their hands on. So, and so I think there's a lot of potential in various parts of that property. So I think it's something we want to keep our eyes on, our hands on.
The charter mentions a Hillcrest area plan.
well, OIA ended up decommissioning that facility and getting
Yeah.
All developed.
was
Housing.
had a
Sold off.
One more
maintenance
reason,
needs.
charter, I guess.
Yeah, we got to clean all that stuff out of the charter that's no longer a.
Hillcrest, Mill Creek, that's all.
Yeah.
fine.
So, and this document just shows just gives some reference for the statutes and the rules that affect that. But we're kind of thinking about what is the process moving forward to do this and kind of the methodology. And So there's these area plans that are these sort of constituent areas of the city that occupy all of our buildings that are state-owned lands. And then there's what's called a coordination plan. The coordination plan is the plan for the plans. How do they interact? How does one area relate to another area?
The master doc.
Kind of a master plan. I don't know if it's really a master plan. It's a coordination plan. I think it's how these other areas work together. And the definition is so vague in like the rules and the statute that I think you can interpret what the usefulness of that plan would be in terms of a tool and how you can shape that to be more effective. And I also think that, so there's this big plan, the coordination plan, and then there's like major plan updates, which is like, this is so old, it makes no sense to update this on the margin. And really needs to have a whole new, complete kind of visioning and exercise.
What is this block? What area plan is this whole block in?
This is technically the Capitol
Capitol?
Mall.
Okay.
This is like a little appendage of the Capitol Mall. So there's major plan updates, which would be like the whole soup to nuts of the plan. And then there's like maybe the newer plans may have a minor plan update, or if it's something where we discussed when we developed the rules that say something, a property gets sold off or something gets changed, that it's just a minor tweak to the plan, but you don't have to redo all of the policies. And so that's kind of the level that we're dealing with is this huge kind of framework plan, I think is more appropriate for what a coordination plan could be used as. And then there's the big redos, like redoing the Capitol Mall master plan is critical. It was last updated in 1992. There probably is a completely different vision and intended utility of this area. And as Salem has changed, we should re-examine that in its entirety. I think the policies are pretty vague, as we discovered with the Supreme Court ruling. So
Yeah.
But we keep talking about the Supreme Court building. According to statute, the judiciary is exempted from us, from.
correct, but they still have to, they're still part of a plan. So the judiciary doesn't have to ask for us for money, but they have to comply with the development policies in the area plan. So that's kind of the tooth that we have is to, by virtue of putting a building on the Capitol Mall as a state agency, we have that control over what the policies are in terms of whatever that development is, but we can't tell them they can't build a building or they can't pay for it. That's all a legislative thing.
So just like theoretically, just a hearing. So the yellow parking lot, if we were looking at the area plan for the Capitol Mall, for example, could we project that at some point that have a different use other than a parking lot?
Can you project it would have a different use
Could have it
other than a
parking.
gravel parking lot?
I mean, when you're talking about vision, I mean, I'm thinking.
Yeah, I think, but you know, with a large, there's been a few visions for that particular parcel.
I remember they were moved that.
We have many visions for it. So actually making it comply with our rules.
That's why update plans pretty, periodically is because things change, but
I think that was a location that was going to be for the exec building. They were going to move DAS West when I was at DAS West, and
yeah, there was a feasibility study for a new
We're
building.
gonna pave it.
I was gonna say, it's on the list for payment, isn't it? It got funded last session, didn't it? Yeah, that's right.
Be summer 25.
Yeah.
New ADA and street.
and then you're going to give DAS West to the city.
Is Des West the post office? Okay.
We're investing a lot of money in that right now.
No, it's going to be great. It's so wonderful.
Over there.
We have a whole list of state buildings we want to convert into housing.
Yeah, I know.
I mean,
If they're empty, they.
yeah, exactly.
Can I ask about maybe perceived level of urgency? Just throwing that out. We're named after the capital, so the Capital Planning Commission, yet the capital area plan is the oldest of them all with 4 decades, 3 decades. I can't do the math. I've been on the commission, this is my 7th month and only my 2nd building. This will take another 30 years for us to get there at the current pace. Maybe,
Well,
I'm poking a little bit.
yeah,
I'm wondering what the sort of perceived urgency is. Our charter says we will review them every 5 years, yet the most current one is 15 years old
Yeah.
almost.
Daniel's playing catch up.
well, you're
Like-
picking up on some of the basis about why we approached redoing this, because it was pretty outdated, hadn't been managed in the past very effectively, I think, and other things come up. So things slip through the cracks.
So that's
Where-
part of the reason that I'm here now as well, and that we brought it over to the enterprise asset management side, the facilities people, is that we see changes coming potentially to the facilities, to the capital plans. I mean, we just went through a pandemic and now you're talking about buildings for housing and we're trying to figure out where we're gonna do all of our office.
All like the fairgrounds.
So this is the actual effort from state of Oregon.
Yeah.
To put into this group, state the plans and understand and really be planful for the future.
Wouldn't the capital area plan, and maybe that, Jan, we were thinking of that, the capital area plan be our top priority to attack first? As opposed to these other?
Meeting, there was a proposal from me that I have funding in place that we could use the Capital Mall area plan as a template, if you will.
Yeah,
We could collaboratively work through the process. I could build it out and then build a template for the other
right.
agencies listed to be able to do their capital plans.
The other thing I think it's important for context is there was in statute and in rule, there was kind of some momentum to kind of shut this thing down for a time. And then recently we've been going through the effort to kind of reconstitute it.
Mm.
So we were kind of headed, I think the planning commission was kind of headed for demise. And so I think that that's I think is a part of a lot of the stagnation. And now that's not the direction. And so now it's like, okay, we're trying to kickstart it again.
Yeah, I mean, it was decommissioned and it was resuscitated, but kind of orphaned a little bit.
Yeah.
Now we're trying to make it a real boy or girl and function as people want it to be. So in terms of the approach, we have a couple of several degrees of freedom, I guess, in terms of how we approach it. But I think we're all kind of looking at things like what makes the most sense for proceeding, because I think this is a lot, and not everybody's going to be here for the entire ride. You know, people are going to peel off from the commission, but we want to have some continuity to it. What needs to be set up for that continuity, and what's the best approach in terms of resources, timing, and kind of the strategy. And so we have this thing where we have a coordination plan that needs to be figured out, and then we have all these specific area plans. I think we are probably of the agreement that the Capital Mall area plan is the most in need of being updated and has probably the best potential for us to kind of lay out what the aspirations and expectations would be for developing the other plans. But we also needed to think about this coordination plan and what that constitutes. And because I feel like there's been a lot of change in the city in 20, 30 years, who knows? We haven't really done this overview kind of analysis of whether or not all of this, the city's done some sort of zone changes. There's been, who knows? I mean,
We just completely rewritten our development code.
yeah, we need to look at that
Right.
on a broad level to kind of get everything in the right framework for then doing what these more refined plans of these area plans. So you start with a baseline, and I think we can either do it start with one and go to the next one while we're setting up a process for updating the Capital Mall master plan. But we got to figure out what this coordination plan, what would be most effective for using that as a tool to understand the relationship between, say, the Capital Mall and the state hospital area. Is there a relationship, or is that relationship kind of diminishing over time because the state hospital's kind of halved in terms of its load of that area. So is it the same kind of transportation thing? There's just a lens we can look at it from a big, broad perspective about these clumps of land in the city, and are we laying out these facilities in a way that is working? I don't know, but so there's that. You start with this framework, then you have begin to work on this capital mall master plan, which is a refinement, and it's going to require much more work, but more kind of detail. And that's where we want to engage a contractor, which is going to take us time to develop a contract vehicle to make that possible. But you have to think about what you want the outputs to be to give those contractors a way of approaching it. And it'd be somewhat of an iterative process, but
Be able to set it up to where we could actually bring our architect friends to a meeting and have conversations. They would lead us on this. I've already reached out to a couple to see their process, and I found one that actually has experience in doing plans such as this. And so they could take some of the guesswork out of it for us.
Are you familiar with Salem's?
Lots of work for us.
I think it's good that you kind of bring that up, because I think having some sort of technical expertise in just ensuring that the use of those area plans are that land, those facilities is our needs, but also just what is the relationship between our capital mall and other capital malls, and what is the distinctions and differences, and what works well and what doesn't. I don't know if that analysis has ever really been done as a background about where we kind of, some states do things certain ways and others. Does this work for us? There's got to be some sort of baseline for that, but having.
Well, and there's pieces of this that, it's an interconnected corridor of employers that goes on for a mile that includes the Capitol Mall. So there's context here too that I don't think often gets pulled into this. I mean, you have all of Willamette, and then you have all of the Capitol Mall, and then you have a whole residential section on the other side one way, and the city on the. I mean, it's pieces and it's the whole as well. So it's a good model to study first. This has changed a lot.
Our most complicated model.
For sure. For sure.
And I also think would be helpful to have some kind of trend analysis in how other state capitals or government entities with a lot of capital outlay are dealing with this transition between having owned facilities versus leasing, and then this whole office utilization issue. And are they trimming the fat, or are they just land banking and keeping it for later, or how are they resolving these sort of changing landscape of facilities by the government in our community, particularly state capital? And I really think that interrelationship is, there's these specific policies that deal with trees and stuff, but really it is this relationship between the presence of state government inside of a city government, and what are the implications of that, and what are the negotiated benefits and trade-offs that we can agree to as a plan to then serve as the foundation for reviewing projects to see if they comply. We have this solid basis that is a mutually beneficial and agreed upon framework for both entities. I mean, that's how I see the coordination plan is what is this relationship, and is how we're using our facilities in these places helping or hurting?
So do you need a decision from our group today on anything, or is
There's no decision other than the fact that we're I'm just providing the next discussion point in our work plan about moving forward towards this thing of updating these old plans, and everything. It's a little fluid in terms of our approach, and we've only mildly been discussing it internally, but I think that as long as we get
So what I was wanting to bring today was an offering of writing a scope of work for a capital plan. And, you know, we obviously won't hire anybody, and we could bring it to the next meeting and have everybody evaluate it and see if we've captured essentially what it is that we want to have in there. But we also internally here at DAS are about 2 months away from really having everything fully baked as far as facility utilization. We're doing new space management policies. The governor is evaluating everything, because currently our intention is to essentially fill the Capitol Mall with employees. So we're gonna just be rotating different buildings and bringing people into all these buildings and having mixed agency use. So the intention is to continue using it as is, but obviously update it, harden it, modernize everything with new technology and whatnot. So that's the vision, but we have to get that final approval. But by the time the next meeting comes up, I anticipate that will be complete. And then we would be able to share.
You moving corrections back into the Capitol Mall or to the Capitol Mall?
We don't know exactly how the pieces will fit, but we are putting together a
Greedy.
policy for a facility station.
I do not understand that.
What do you hear?
I do not.
Well, she wanted, Colette wanted to go with the state police and build a building, and then they kind of ixnayed her out of that conversation and did their thing and then told her that no, there's never.
But the implications of what you're talking about, Jeremy, isn't that partially things like, do we need as much parking as we have planned, or are those, I mean, there's all kinds of pieces if the use of these changes.
Absolutely, parking is a big part of it, and that's part of our internal policy discussion currently, is if we do bring other buildings in and other people in, how much parking do we truly need? So we're changing our model for parking. All of this stuff is up in the air right now, and we're hoping within the next 90 days, we have that final
And when you say bringing them in, from where?
days. People have gone home and work.
Okay.
And so now we're starting
So
to
from
say,
home.
hey, you need to come to the office 2, 3, 4 days a week, however that's gonna work.
Okay, so you're not talking about relocating physical, you're talking about people. You're not talking about like
People,
departments.
right?
Okay, relocate.
I guess Capitol, it's not gonna get the corrections. Sorry. think you're
It's
dealing
a long process.
The same issues that in the private workforce, people are dealing with,
Yep.
how to get employees back into the office.
Everybody acts like they really know what they're doing, but then when you really get in, you start asking and pulling information at them, and they're just like, not sure what.
So I guess this conversation is really about kind of getting an idea about developing a game plan for moving forward, and we're taking your temperature on the game plan, but knowing that we're still figuring things out before we'd have something to.
Play the game. I like the game.
Yeah, but I think that we're ready to draft the scope for capital.
Great.
And you have the money, right? I mean, that's another piece. It's the money was allocated to develop this. Isn't that correct?
I was going to create a fund source for it, yes. It supported the CPC.
Yes.
Nice.
Okay.
It wasn't a.
Do you
pop
think-
that I think through.
As we kind of identify those things that are in the CPC scope and those things aren't, do you think it would be helpful to have, I'm, envisioning a table that describes the kinds of specifics that we will evaluate in an area plan or an updated area plan, and then identifying also those things that are going to be evaluated by the city and maybe other entities as well, just to be clear that we don't have the same thing being being evaluated 3 times, and that to change example, I was kind of curious about what the resolution on the glass of the building at the retail space, whereas State Building wants to do dark glass, not transparent. The city standard is for transparent. Who wins on that? Is that the city, right? I would imagine
Yes,
that has final authority. Yeah. Okay. So
we could
so those are-
negotiate any of those things in relation to a payment in lieu of taxes, but at this point,
Figure it out.
yes, we win.
It just didn't change the class.
Yeah.
That's
So
right.
anyway, I
That's
just
the
think
key.
it was,
Resolved itself.
That's the key.
I just think it would.
You don't
be
make a
helpful to
change, you're fine.
to identify those things that it probably doesn't make sense for the CPC to spend a lot of time on, sort of getting into weeds that will, that are already described in clear and objective standards that, but we should be looking at the big picture, how these spaces relate to one another, how these area
Yeah.
plans relate to one another, and not getting into the details of that are going to be evaluated by others.
Well said.
Hey, do you have what you need?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I think that, yeah, I just want to take your temperature on this because it's a transition of topics of, to do things on a list. So this is the next phase, but it will be long and complicated, but I think it's going to be fun.
We had fun on the last one. Rewriting on that.
Sure.
Sure.
So,
And we're happy to host the subcommittee if that's helpful. If it's not, that's fine too.
I think that's helpful for me because you're easy to park nowadays.
yeah, I mean, that was gonna be my thing, is like, it seemed like that worked out just because it was a nice location. But, so yeah, I could just work with Daniel.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, the immediate next step is, at least for me, is just to kind of shepherd through this charter thing, just to get that off the list.
Okay.
But there's some background work that we're doing to kind of position this planning process to get kicked off and formalized. And then at some point, all this will be just done. It'll
Yeah.
be cleaned up and it'll be on autopilot for a while.
For 4 years.
Well, until there's
For the 5 years.
one of the things that the clauses we put in there about, the periodic update triggers things. We did put in some wiggle room in the language about.
No.
We're in a major recession and we're gonna have to park this for a couple of years. We had those added in there, but by and large, it's, like every 4 to 6 years or whatever we set in there. So it doesn't get, the distinction between a major plan update and a minor plan update, for most of these plans, 6 years, not much is going to change. It could be just a small text change or map change, if anything. But when you're dealing with these things that haven't been addressed for decades, that's the upfront kind of large task that we have to do that's kind of deferred.
So when can we expect an early charter draft or draft charter?
Just the charter, not the area plans.
Well, so there's another aspect of this that I was gonna discuss, which was, so we have the CPAP process coming up. And one of the things that we made made sure to, resolve with the administrative rules to make sure that people are going to CPC, agencies are going to CPC before they go to CPAP. So CPC knows what's in the pipeline, and that CPAP knows that an agency is proposing a project that is compliant with the area plan. So it's this.
Because it's been through it.
Yeah. So that's a timing thing. And so I set up on your calendars, monthly meetings to deal with this need to have agencies present their projects to CPC before they submit their facility plans to CPAP.
So we can be timely and responsive to them.
So we have this thing where if there's a project, we could be meeting on a monthly basis, but I don't know what agencies are working on right now. So that's a long way of saying, I just wanted to preface that I did have some other stuff that I wanted to bring up here, but that we need to reserve some meeting times for potentially having to review projects. But we could also, it could be I think the next, I think what I did monthly meetings as a placeholder, but I also in the agenda, I just put like April's our next quarterly meeting, because we may not have anything depending on the agencies before then. So if it could be that I would have a kind of an agreed upon draft by April, but that draft would have been, I think, between now, so February, maybe in March. If we need March, we would have this internal working group completely formalize this charter change where you would be sort of ratifying it at the April meeting. Does that seem reasonable and doable?
Yeah, I
Yep.
see multiple tracks of work. There's sort of like getting on top of those plans.
Yeah.
And if we were to crank out one a year, it would take us 5, 6, 7 years just to get into a rhythm of then reviewing them every 5, 6, 7 years too. And then there's all the work that from the agencies will be coming our way.
Correct.
I bet this first
So-
initial plan is gonna be more than a year.
Yeah,
Oh,
I'm just
yeah.
trying to do some back of the envelope math in my head, at what pace we'd have to proceed to seriously catch up and get current with all of our plans, the area plans and the agriculture plan, and also with the charter, because they will also then get into a 5 or 8 year review cycle and the work that comes from the agencies. So I think even if we met month, we have a lot of work ahead of us to get back on track.
Yeah, I mean, even with that recognition, I think that for this next year, this whole CPAP cycle, I feel like we did a lot in terms of updating the rules where it's going to be agencies have to get accustomed to what is now being expected of them. And considering that the plans are very old, it may be that we kind of soft launch that implementation of these rules until everybody's kind of up to speed, because for some agencies it could be kind of difficult to kind of hold together everything without them anticipating that they need to do it with enough advanced warning. And that's where I need to kind of discuss that with the agencies. But it is now scheduled out, though, that agencies would, if they have a project in Salem, that they would let me know first, go to CPC first, and then it would be acknowledged as compliant with an area plan, and then it would go to CPAP the next month. And I just don't know what, to the extent how much that really applies to agencies, because I don't know what people are proposing for the city, within the city. Could be that we have anticipated that other projects in the years previous would be, a handful or whatever, and it turns out we didn't have any in the city of Salem. So we make room for it, but then
Yeah.
we don't have anything to talk about because nothing materialized. So
So maybe the charter by April.
I think, I think that's easily doable, that we would be able to complete that and approve it by April. And it's just whether or not we would have any projects to evaluate for that sort of early groups of agencies that are presenting to CPAP first. That's the ones that it's just getting all this stuff sort of packaged together and everybody informed and up to speed so they can sort of comply by that first group, which goes in April. So they would essentially need to have their projects reviewed in March, which I have scheduled out, but that's not a lot of advance notice of that expectation. So
And wouldn't our busiest time for this commission be prior to, say, September, October? Because then agencies are presenting their proposal, getting ready to go to the legislature for requests for funding for those projects. And they submit their budget in the early, like November. So
but
they would
submit
have to have those
their
decisions.
budgets at the end of August, the beginning of September. So everything that we do with CPAP has to be
Be prior to
completed.
that.
Yeah, and so if
So this would
the
be our busiest.
CPC review of a project has to take place before it goes to
Right.
CPAP for review, and we only do those in set months by group. You can see it's this kind of orchestration of
Yeah.
timing and
And I think now would be our time that we're going to be getting requests from agencies for that review. Before
in the
end of
next couple
summer.
months,
Yeah.
I will have a better idea of that. So we're still in kind of this messy period.
Yeah.
Where we're trying to figure out how to move forward in a way that doesn't overly kind of tax agencies. this is always the problem, but this is the new expectation. I think on the margin, we may have to be a little flexible in terms of getting agencies up to speed, but they will know that.
You saw how well we pivoted on the meeting room. We pivoted.
Yeah. I mean, I think where Jeremy and I are at is like the 27, 29 session is our real, like, that's the real meaningful one. We're gonna have all our ducks in a row, hopefully. Right now, we're still kind of like wading through figuring out some things and this big transition, but we have a lot of the foundational things, what some people would call the hard work, already done. So now it's just the next step.
So I have all the area plans, the cadence will be.
Yeah, we want to establish that cadence expectations.
There's a lot of agency conversations because, I mean, I think that there's still an issue of people knowing when to go to the CPC.
Yeah.
Do I need to, it says $1 million of what? Just, so I was taught when I came to DAS, if it's the exterior of the building. That was as much information as I was given. So I think that there's some education. Daniel and I were talking this morning about just doing a simple 1 or 2 page document to get out to all the agencies, and we can go to the deputy directors meetings, and we'll just start pushing this information so people know and understand. Because if I have found if the agencies know what their expectations are, they follow through.
Yeah.
All the information will come. We're gonna add, like, if the CPC comes up with an item that they'd like to see in project projections in their documents, then we can just add that in, just like with CPAP, because those aren't, and I'm making sure I'm not speaking out of turn, those aren't major changes. Those are things that we want to track. Because part of the goal is to partner with the city of Salem and have that relationship. I remember the previous mayor I met with, and he really just had questions like, holy cow, he's asking me questions about stuff that he should know. And so that's, we're trying to build that bridge and that conversation so that, it's like, hey, I'm going to submit money for the LNI building to renovate it. I'll get it, but I'm going to try. That's the next one after the exec building. So that's why I want to be a part of this.
For sure. Jim, did you have something? I see your hand.
I did. Thank you. Let me figure out how to unraise my hand here. One question probably for Jeremy and for Daniel is that we imagined, or I believe there was discussion that any of these area plan updates would have a cost to the group that would be working on them. And whether there was money that would be able to be allocated for that, whether they had to own it inside their regular operating budgets. If you're imagining a 2027 target date for this becoming live and active, should we be working on some strategy to get them money or to get them to start thinking about money to develop out these redos of the plans?
I personally wasn't anticipating having all the area plans done by 27, 29. I don't know if that's possible because
No,
we're going to work through the capital wall plan. And part of the contract firm will be to create a template of how to create area plan.
Yeah.
Because we'll capture everything that the group says that we want in it, and then we'll be able to share that with other agencies. It shouldn't be too terribly expensive, but I just don't think we have the time between now and 27.
We don't have time to do all the plans.
Yeah.
We have all this stuff that we have to plan to plan. But I think that establishing and formalizing the expectation and the process and the procedure and what's expected is something we can solidify by 27, 29, where we're not in this weird kind of like build mode. We're in a like implementation mode, even though the plans need to be updated. There's agencies are fully aware what is expected of them. There isn't like, oh, I didn't know that kind of response, that everything is documented, formalized. They are.
I think to your point though, Jim, having those 2 seats filled with the senator and the representative will go a long way in helping us have those conversations for additional funding for agencies down the road.
Yeah, good point.
But has anybody talked to like Deb Patterson? Could she do it? She's Salem. She's right here.
Well, it's this is one of the things that's kind of
Who's having
outside of
those
my control. I mean,
who's asking the legislators to sit on this?
executive appointments. I mean, it's the governor's office, so I can,
If there's, so this is kind of new to me, this whole thing, so. We'll have a conversation because we do have people that can ask. I just need to understand how and who.
And if I can help, let me know if I need to, if I can talk to the speaker or the president, I'm happy to do that, or if it's the governor, I'm happy to do that, whatever you want, whatever will be helpful.
well, I think any help would be helpful.
Do you have anybody in mind? Senator Patterson, Rep. Anderson,
I think
Rep.
so it
Mannix?
needs to be a designee from the Senate President and the House
Paxton.
Speaker. So who was the,
I can't get.
I think you may have taken over his spot.
Spot.
The
Brian Clem.
Brian Clem.
Oh, that was
Yeah.
me,
So
Mannix.
it's having people that are familiar with the area. So who's the best candidate that has the most knowledge of
Yeah.
this
And
area?
the time, and I think it'd be,
Yeah.
Last time in 92.
Oh, did he?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, Mannix, if he's interested, would be good.
I saw his name on there.
Oh, interesting.
Yes, I think
we just need to ask, because I mean, just looking forward, we're gonna need that advocacy.
Okay.
really,
Right.
it would be great because I've asked probably, I'm gonna say like 10 times. So at this point, I'm like, any help would be kind of great, but I will say though, with our the planning commissioner designee, we're at like a full boat for the first time in a long time. So if we can get those other two non-voting member positions filled, it would be amazing, especially knowing that we would have this upcoming process that would be utilize their knowledge and
I think you guys decide who you want, and then Chris,
Yeah, I'm happy to pursue that, but I don't want to be cross purposes with you. I want to.
maybe somebody from the state and somebody from the city can go have the
I
conversation.
personally would just probably go to our director, have a conversation, have a good relationship with the governor, and we'll then have a conversation, and I would assume magic would happen.
Well, but I don't think they go through the governor's office. The governor has appointed, I'm the last person the governor appointed. The last two come from the speaker and
Yeah, it
the
has to come from
president.
The speaker and the president, yes.
somebody can prod from executive appointments, may be able to prod and, but they have to actually make for some reason, there's a breakdown of that. And I don't know. So if our director can do that, or
Yeah.
as the mayor, I think that would have
As the
some degree of pull
Committee.
with the intent of what the CPC is designed for. It's, having that relationship. Yeah, I think it'd be great. We're at a time where we want to give some care and feeding to this mission and update things. So we really need some help.
You're gonna take the first run?
I can.
I think I just heard.
All right, I'm happy to do that.
If
I
you
mean,
don't
I
mind.
can, I'm going to text the speaker right now. I will text him and say, hey, I need somebody appointed.
From the Salem area.
power, do it.
Hopefully from the Salem area,
Yeah.
so they're familiar with.
I would love it if somebody,
Somewhere they have to live in Marion County.
The legislative appointment, I don't know.
it doesn't for the legislature it's required. We have all our locational requirements met. But I
At
think that the
least
best
two.
people would be the people that understand Salem the best.
Yeah.
We have somebody from Polk County, something that's in Polk County.
We got-
Polk County is mentioned in there, that might be,
Yeah, we took the Polk County, I think, out of the
Yeah.
rules.
We did,
Yeah, it's just
because we didn't have any
Marion County. There has to be somebody from Marion County.
the of Salem over there.
liver, formerly known as West Salem.
Yeah, I live in Lynn County. Hopefully that's okay. You don't need to leave the room.
No.
It's
Yeah, but commute.
right across the river, it's Marion County.
Yeah. Oh. I think having somebody from Salem's the best.
Yeah.
Salem Kaiser.
Yeah, I think that Brian Clem's, that position is a good position.
That's currently Mannix.
Yeah,
And this office is right on Capitol Street,
Mhm.
in the middle of it.
Schmack dab.
I thought Clem's position was Tom.
Nope. I was the next one in and then it was Kevin.
Okay,
It's 21. Tom is 19.
okay.
I think Tom is Raquel, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, if, as an action item, if we could actually manage to get those filled,
Would do us good.
I just fixed it, the speaker. Let's see what he says.
then we'll
Because
figure
we-
out who's gonna serve that planning commissioner, if it's gonna be Michael or somebody
Or
else.
Lisa,
And then we can,
because she can do a designee and I really,
He's never gonna show up.
he'll never show up.
But we'll encourage him to
At least.
designate.
Bylaw, if you miss more than 3 in a row, you're out. In fact, that in our charter, if we wanted just to keep things.
Except that it's
running.
always a designee from the Salem Planning Commission, so we would just be,
But we want the same designee.
yeah.
The constant designee.
Lisa will work on that.
Yeah, Lisa will come to the meeting.
The other Lisa.
Oh, the other, Lisa,
Yeah.
Lisa work, Lisa.
That's what I mean. Yeah.
that sounds good. So I just wanted to like, present that, stay where we're at, and yeah, there's the stuff coming down the road that we've been talking about for a long time, but we finally got to a place where making progress.
It's a success.
Yes.
So that's all I've got in terms of what I have to present.
Cool. Next meeting, like,
Anybody else has anything that?
No members of the public for comments online or otherwise, I'm assuming? Great.
So in closing, I'll say, just to reiterate, I'm going to work with your, Daniel, to set up a work group meeting at City Hall. Jim, Kane, Mayor, I will draft a revised charter. We'll get through as quickly as possible with the goal of adopting that in April, and hopefully we'll have some more information about moving forward. But also bear in mind that we will have a little bit more insight in terms of the agencies that would need to present to CPC
Yeah.
first in that first group, if any.
Okay.
I think the most, I would assume maybe the Department of Education might be doing something at the deaf school, but that's, I don't know. We'll see where they're at.
Okay.
So that's just the first group. And, the second group is, a month or so out. So we have some time to. Does that make sense? I know this is kind of new for some of you, but I want to have more procedurally in place as well about having intake forms and so what you're receiving is helpful in terms of making a review.
Perfect.
I still got to kind of think through that a little bit. So I'll add that to the list on April. We'll formalize these review criteria document things that agencies would use to respond.
Okay.
And on the list.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for attending. Thank you for the folks who joined us online. Oh, Mike, yeah.
Quick question. I saw that we got a new round of calendar invites. I just wanted to confirm that our next meeting is February 8th. Is that correct?
February 8th would be,
One of those on,
it's a hold day date.
in case we get a request.
In case we need
Okay.
to move forward. But if there isn't a project and we aren't very far in terms of the charter and whatnot, I'll just cancel that and we'll pick it up either in March or April. But I put on the
Told us we didn't need.
on the agenda, I put April simply because that's our next quarterly meeting, and that's the one I'd like to just maintain as the next sort of big meeting. If we need to have a
Okay.
project review meeting, it's I'll let everybody know.
Sorry, that was me.
Yeah. And I guess I would ask if you could give us, I'll keep it on my calendar, but if you could give us 1 week or 2 weeks notice that the meeting is not going to be held, so we can free up that time, that would be helpful.
Definitely.
Okay, great. All right.
Thanks, everybody. We're adjourned.
Right.
All right, thank you.
Here's my request.
Uh-huh.
No, just in first. We used to be able to have the commissioners park under
You're amazing, Amy.
It's great. That guy just away at 6:30, that.
You said that to